population have, because of the excesses of the IRI, have fallen into irreligion. So what does that mean? To reform the Islamic Republic when the majority consensus presently anyway is anti-Mullah, is anti-Hoza, is anti-Islam itself. And this is a problem in my eyes, because that means that at the moment that the Islamic Republic falls, there's a vacuum, ideological vacuum, that every kind of shaitan can step into immediately and use for their own benefit. And Iran is a history rich in religious ideas and adherence, whether we're talking pre-Islamically with the Zoroastrians, and then, or even in during the Islamic period with a whole variety of beliefs, not just Shiism. I look at this, not with much glee, but I mean, this system that the Islamic Republic has completely discredited religion itself, not just Islam, but religion itself in the eyes of its population.
Yeah.
So what do you want for? Exactly.
It's sad. Well, I mean, it'd be nice if they could be like, okay, actually Ali is sort of this progressive-ish in moderation figure, and we're going to pivot and let's have a religious fervor around Ashura. We have, more democracy, more power to the parliament, and maybe they could theoretically, because, you have all these Mutazilite ideas of, in the good sense, not in the extremist Minhaj sense, the Adl, you've got decent theology, God doesn't have literal hands, and so on. So there's a lot of nice, I mean, you're technically a 12er, you're an Ithna-Ashari of a extension cord through Babism, heterodox things. So there's a lot to like about that set of ideas, and it ought to be tenable. And theoretically, the regime itself could position, instead of doing a controlled opposition to do some kind of false flag, you can do a controlled opposition to replace yourself with a more survivable successor version. And the new elected president seems to be that. So all you really need is for Homs to be a bit clever in this way and sort of fake their own death, like an Andy Kaufman Homs spectacular,
Naraje have been complaining for years, and this is from the seminary in Qom itself, that people are not paying the homes. That tells you something. So, if regime was to reform, this would not only require a fundamental reform in the structures of the political system, but then following from that, there would be a widespread demand for a complete overhaul of the seminary system and its structures of power as well. So that means that the whole question of the Marja'iyah, the whole source of emulation, this whole development that came about in 12er Shiism as of the 19th century, is up for grabs. Because people are questioning, why are we paying khums at all to these clerics, who have, in our eyes, corrupted our country, corrupted the religion. Maybe the religion itself is corrupt because it allows these kind of types to rise in it, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the problem that you face. I mean, most Westerners, and especially Muslim reverts, have no idea about some of the opinions of the Iranian people. And I saw this during Women Life Freedom, where I'm supporting women life freedom, but then I'm being accused by very recent reverts to Islam of being a kind of an agent of a foreign power.
Sure.
And, I have put a pox in the house of everybody. But I know my people. I am in contact with Iranians on a daily basis, and I know where the opinion is, and what the sentiment is, and why it's there, what the history is. Another example, a more recent example, is that the majority of the Iranian opposition, and even some people who are kind of on the peripheries of things, celebrated the Israeli assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. And most Westerners who are on the side of Palestine and the whole axis of resistance find this sentiment incomprehensible. Well, the fact is that Hezbollah, for the last 20-something years, was actually used by the system as a shock troop against the Iranian population on several occasions. Number one, in 2009, during the Green Uprising. Then again, back in 2019, when you had the fuel shortage uprising that happened. And then once more in 2022, 2023 with Women Life Freedom. Because the system could not trust its own security forces because there was defections happening right and left. So they were flying in Hezbollah, they were flying in Hashd-e-Shabi from Iraq and other similar proxy groups.
So it's like the Shia version of what they were doing with ISIS, basically, where
Exactly. Yeah.
And I hear what they're doing now. There's some Uyghur guys in as well. And I've heard what I assume was slander, where they're like kind of ethnic cleansing Sunnis. But at this point, when I hear something horrible about the Middle East, I just tend to assume it's all true on both sides. It's just...
Yeah, it is. I mean, atrocities by Hezbollah in Syria happen. I mean, these people can deny it as much as they want. The evidence is foolproof, right? That doesn't absolve the other side of its own atrocity. They did it as well. But they happen. And so these narratives of innocence and claiming that, there's exaggeration about atrocities from one side is nonsense. Hezbollah had blood on its hands, especially the blood of the Iranian people. So what I wanted to say is that do not underestimate on the ground widespread hatred of the Iranian people for the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is why, reforming this thing is not going to work. And the next spark that comes is going to topple that regime completely, especially now since, Hezbollah is completely defanged. Hashd-e-Shabi is completely defanged. We're living in a completely different geopolitical reality. And the only reason why these Gulf potentates are not giving their full consent for a regime change in Iran itself is because they are not completely certain of what replaces Ali Khamenei and that system in Iran. That is the only thing that's holding them back. And they themselves pulled the plug on support for the Women Life Freedom movement because they were absolutely petrified of the prospect of a feminist revolution succeeding in a country like Iran that would then set a trend throughout the region as a whole and create a momentum, a sort of a feminist, radical feminist momentum within the region.
Well, that is happening in the Ummah just through women being able to kind of get in a gray area in the thick of speaking to men before marriage over the internet, so it's not so sus. And then I can figure out if this guy is going to be one of these many guys after we get married, and then I'm going to have to get divorced, and then I'm going to end up marrying the whole masjid because like 80% of them are like that. So I'm going to take my time. Maybe I'll just get my MD or my master's and never get married. And then this is potentially an opportunity for dawah because if you're a Western guy who has a different standard for women, you want to be a little more traditional. So you kind of meet them in the middle because they're not trying to, they could just apostate if they wanted to, but they're trying to just be Muslimah with a little bit more of a flexible home environment, and so on. So I can see that being a major thing. Do you think that the hatred for the Islamic Republic extends to Islam to the point that we might see like mass defections of Shiism and the sort of 180 million number is going to be deflated and it's just going to end up being like there are as many true Ithna Asharis as there are Ismailis as there are Quranists. It's just another kind of minority like neutron star.
It's happening already. This is my fear because into a vacuum such as that will step in the Baha'is, will step in evangelical missionary groups. Will step in every conceivable New Age cult that you can imagine, and on it goes. This is the problem, and the presence of these groups that I just mentioned to you are culture-wrecking, insidious forces for the greater existence of Iranian culture, whether in its Islamicity or not. And this is my fear. So, amongst the reasons why I have come out as much as I have come out and have my own proverbial dawah, if you would, is precisely to become a sort of a counterpoint to all of this sort of thing, especially where Iran is concerned. Because the mullahs and that whole seminary, that usuli system of the Hosa, that is on its way out in Iran. Now, it can exist in Iraq for as long as it wants, but with Iranians, the party is over.
Iraq is a more stable Shia country in that sense, because they've embraced enough democracy and so on that they can push back against this despicable, early marriage law and so on, and actually see a result. So they don't burn out. Burnout typically isn't because you've been working 60-hour weeks. It's because you haven't felt the ownership of the consequences of that input, right? So this is kind of the point of democracy, even when it's co-opted by oligarchy to some extent, which I imagine in Iraq, I'm sure it must be to some extent, but not like it is in Saudi or Iran. Well, and also, you mentioned Dawa as the sort of the flip side of this coin of chaos. Coin of chaos is the heads of that is that, the Salafi Dawa has also kind of, I think, peaked with YouTube. So then it's a grab bag. So I've seen Sheikh Nurjan, they've managed to pump their YouTube to 1.3 million. There's a sort of Quranism dawa. I've been trying to come up with a more, Christian friendly Mutazili dawa. That's something I've been doing on my channel. Just one, talk at a time, kind of cooking it up. Haven't written the sales pamphlet yet, but you're kind of working on a Batini Shiism dawa, which needs to be definitely. It's like the problem with the Mutazili, where there were no lay Mutazili, so they were inherently shills for the state, or they were weirdos in ignominy. So there needs to be like an antechamber of like lay Mutazili that basically, like you mentioned, these young women usually who come into Islam, they go, okay, no pedophilia, thank you. So I guess I'm a Shia, but I don't know about all this Jafar stuff, maybe, low imamology. So I guess I'm a Zaidi. And then I'm apologizing for the Houthis, and I haven't read the Musnad Zaid, and I haven't identified it as an Abbasid mimetic engineering project to cripple the Zaidi revolutionary potential with like pedophilia and basically putting Shafi's Risala in the mouth of Imam Ali. It's a completely different Imam, guys. And so this is where I think, okay, we need like something a little cleaner. So the Mutazili I consider to be Shia. They forgot this. They followed a guy who renounced Shiism, who was, Shialite. He's a Hashemite. He's not a Fatimid. But hey, low imamology. But never mind, we got the power, so we're the Abbasids, and we're going to be Mutazili state. And then it's like, I guess we need to taqlid with kind of Hanbal. It was more Shafi, and come up with this Ash'ari, sort of Nestorian Council of Chalcedon. So, this is something that Gnostic Quran is really good at identifying, is how they kind of did the same thing as the Council of Chalcedon with the Ash'ari. So maybe then we'll stay in power, but God basically curses all these empires when they do shirk and when they do zulm, right? So even with the Fatimids, so then we'll pivot onto the Ismailis. We're running out of time, so we got to cover more bases. The Fatimids were better, but they ultimately, with the infighting, they made themselves weak. I don't know if it was a shirk thing necessarily, but it was definitely at least that. And so now we've got, as a great counterpoint to Wilayat al-Faqih violently trying to ethnic cleanse the Sham, we've got our good old, friendly Western Muslim Pope taking advantage of Portuguese inheritance laws and doing some great things with like Pakistani universities and so on. But you basically don't think that's good enough. So I want to unpack that a little bit.
No, I mean, this went into a long discussion, about my greater perspective on Islam itself, because from the perspective of the Bayan, technically we are post-Islamic, but not post in the sense of rupture, but in the same sense that modernity and post-modernity are continuums of each other. So, I mean, I look at, Ummah today as basically inhabiting, for lack of a better way of putting it, an abrogated dispensation. So they're living within a husk. And all of these various problems that we see today from a metaphysical point of view, in my opinion, are attributable to this very thing. So what I am trying to do is basically create that bridge between the dispensations, if you would, through my own personal dawah. In that the bridge exists. It's not through the Mu'tazila. It's not through any of these theological schools, because they are seriously handicapped on many countless different areas. But through those kind of figures that synthesized these various traits. So Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, as controversial as he is a great figure, unifying figure. Mullah Sadr Shirazi obviously is another one, although, we have certain Sunni followers of the Akbarian school that have a real problem with these Shia Akbarians. You know who I'm talking about online. I won't name the person. And so on. But in my opinion...
Oh, yeah, I know you're talking about that. He's a young guy, but he's very... well, and then there's the older guy who does the podcast. Sure, yeah. Right, so it's like, hey, we're Sufis, we have all this esoteric stuff, but by the way, slavery is definitely like haq. But having gotten that out of the way, let's do a bunch of zikr, and we don't need to actually talk about it. We just need you to sign off on that. We're all Orthodox Sunnis, yeah. So, okay, moving forward. No, and I definitely want to add that Ibn Arabi definitely added to the holes in the Nahul Balagha Mutazili de facto theology, which is the most correct in my opinion, and presumably this is the foundation of your Akida, but that there are logical problems that need to be addressed, and Ibn Arabi did some great work there, and there's more work to do on that. Although I don't think theology is the most pressing issue facing the people right now. So the Ismailis, the Aga Khan worked with the British, and then the Aga Khan the second worked with the Hajars, who the Babis, from a much less posh position, were ultimately trying to Gandhi out of power. Right, this wasn't a violent insurrectionary movement. Right, this was not the Bab's teaching. And then Aga Khan III also has a seventh covenant type thing, which is why everyone takfirs them more so than like the Hassan of Alamut stuff, because that didn't get big. So, okay, it was seventh covenant, Hajj is optional, Ramadan's optional, don't do ruku. Oh, it's pray as the prophet prayed. You're kafirs. Okay, fine. But these are not what your concern is. Your concern is mostly that in order to get back into power, the Ismaili Imams are not really behaving the way that Ali would behave, because he would not become allies of Byzantium in order to flip Muawiyah. He would just get his head chopped in the masjid by the Khawarij, sadly. But
credit where credit is due. They have done charity work in various places around the world. They have, they instituted this Institute of Ismaili Studies that is punching out some very valuable scholarship that is very important to be there for posterity. But on the point of their alliances and their connection, they are an imperial pawn. So, from that specific vantage point, they invalidate themselves. And then you look at most of the Al-Khani community in the West. They're very upper middle class. They are very well endowed financially. They're all extremely successful people in business. And what do they contribute, in my opinion, to the greater struggle to make a better world is nothing, other than those other things that I mentioned. So we give them the credit. I give them the credit where it's credit, and especially given the fact that, given my own jihad against the Baha'is, I have found the Nizari Ismailis, and especially the Al-Khani community, to be a very sweet, nice community of people. They don't have any malevolence, of the kind that I have experienced from the Baha'is. But yet they have these problematic elements to them that cannot be overlooked.
If you were going to give Rahim, the Aga Khan V, a program to suggest and for him to follow without, everybody straps on vests and blows up their nice real estate and so on, but, something that might be more effective and a little bit more nuanced as a way to get the Ismailis more active in changing the status quo, what would that program be?
I would start by giving the entire wealth and assets away, all of every last penny of it. Give it away. Either give it away to the very charities that you've established, or just give it away to certain loci in the third world that need that kind of money. I mean, these are billions. These people are billionaires.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Take a vow of middle, not necessarily poverty, but middle class. Downsize the real estate. Get your budget to like $100K a year in Portugal is actually quite a lot of money. Maybe even $50K would be an above average income in Portugal. So not even a vow of poverty, but yeah, sell the yacht and build 10 orphanages with that money for one thing. Yeah, for sure. Right. So in the high imamology of like, I'm the incarnation of the universal soul, but I have a yacht, it's a hard sell. If the imamology is that I'm endowed with some degree of the Holy Spirit, of the Ruh al-Hudus, that is in all the imams and in some walis and so on, which I imagine is how you see yourself, right? You consider yourself the necessary, you're rising to the challenge of being the manifestation of the bayan, but this doesn't mean that you are like a singular Messiah, right?
Well, the concept, I think, needs to be unpacked. I mean, here's what I am saying. I'm the mirror of the bayan. What does that mean exactly? That means that I am, in one sense, the return of Sopa Azal and the Bab together. This is a concept, not reincarnation. This is archetypal return.
And that's your great-great-grandfather.
What's that?
Suhu Azal is your great-great-grandfather.
No, I don't have a family connection. I actually have a family connection to one of the Bab's foremost disciples, who was a woman, Qurratul Ain, who was considered to be the return of Fatima alayhi salam. So this is who I am claiming to be. And in the Bayanic text, there is a promised one that is the term in the Bayan is Man Yusrullah, he whom God shall make manifest. And there were numerous claimants to this, the last of which was the prophet, founder of Baha'ism, Mirza Hussein Ali Nuri. I am claiming this man to be a fraud, and that the real Man Yusrullah is myself, as the return of the mirror of the Bayan. This is what I'm claiming. So Messiah here, what does that even mean? From the point of the Bayan itself, the Bab, the primal point, already fulfilled those prophecies regarding the coming of the hidden Imam. So he was the archetypal, from our perspective, he was the archetypal return of Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari. And so that whole dispensation of
I thought the Bab was the John the Baptist to the Madhi. So he's like the predecessor.
No. He wants it. This is a Baha'i kind of.
So that way Baha'u'llah can be the one. Yeah. Okay, I get it. So everybody's the Madhi. Yeah. Everybody's the Madhi until the IRS shows up and your 501c3 status has been revoked. So on that note, what do you think of Abdullah Hashim's thing? Have you watched any of his videos?
Oh my God. This is like a new age cult with an Islamic afterthought. And I've noticed that people have been reporting to me over the years that, whether it be, some of my Facebook posts or blog posts or, things that I write here and there have been appropriated by this guy and then repackaged into his own doctrine. So this guy is an ideological thief. Look, that whole Ahmadi religion of peace and light, whatever calling themselves now, is so obviously a Western or even an Israeli agitprop operation, but it's one that's gone bad. I mean, I have had so many people report to me over the years that this thing is a really abusive cult. We're talking about sexual abuse.
Yeah, I saw a blog post, but I didn't want to. But you've got other accounts. Well, the way that he talks about theology is that basically, if you don't do exactly what he says, you're a hadith rejector, is sort of to analogize to the wider, So you're rejecting the commands of the prophet of the time, or the imam of the time, and he's very he's a very charismatic guy. So I can see how he would be like, you need to have your wife come into my office. And you're like, okay, Maddie. And then she goes in and she's like, I served God today. And you're like, good, honey, mashallah.
This brings tears to my eyes, man. In a bad way. This is kufr. This bad. This sanctity of. See, let me put it to you this way: when people become a follower, right? The responsibility that you have is not just to yourself. The responsibility before God, to maintain the moral integrity and not to violate the sanctity of that individual that has come to you is paramount. None of these cult leaders understands this. So they abuse these people. They think that they have an actual right to tasarruf, to control, to infiltrate the lives of these people, when the fact of the matter is that the people that have come to you in the name of God, you have a responsibility beyond it. So therefore, the sin that accrues to you is 1,000-fold more than someone who is not in the same position as you. I have challenged this man for 3 years now to have a mubahala with me, face-to-face mubahala. I cited to him, the 61st verse of the 3rd surah. Come, bring your people and our people, and let us sit, our men and our women, your men and our women, let us curse and let God decide the matter. And this guy has not even responded to
because that's not a debate. That's like a Rafidi style Lanatullah like duel of like in Harry Potter kind of like Crucio, like, and then wherever the Lanats land.
Yeah, this was a practice of the Prophet himself, peace be upon him. This is a practice of all of the Imams, peace be upon them. So if this guy claims to be a representative of the Imam, come. I'm still putting this challenge of Mubahala out publicly to you. Come. If you think you are who you are, not only do I call you a fraud, but I'm saying that I am the Imam, as far as I'm concerned. Right? So come and debate me, Mr. Abdullah Hashim. I don't have anything.
But if I don't make bayat to you, but I'm on board with the sort of general justice, then I'm not going to hell necessarily, right? In your soteriology.
I think the thing that this guy doesn't understand, he should go back to the Quran and read it. Yadullah fawqa ayadihim. Those who gave the Prophet their bayat beneath the tree were giving their bayat to God, not to Muhammad ibn Abdullah.
Right.
But this guy, Abdullah Hashim, when he's taking bayat for people, he's taking bayat on behalf of his own name. And this Yemeni character that nobody even knows is even alive anymore. This is the thing. I do not take or accept a bayat from anyone unless it is the bayat made to God Almighty. Period.
Alhamdulillah.
The difference how I operate and how most of these cult leaders operate. I don't want anybody's money. I don't want anyone's, wife. I don't want anyone's anything, because I am being very open about the fact about what even my political views on economics is. I'm an outright green communist. I don't want to accumulate anything. I am not a cultist. I am not trying to create some kind of a new age cult where we just basically navel gaze for now until Qiyamah. No, I'm calling for revolution. Calling for the collective ownership of the means of production.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about economics more and perhaps in another conversation. My hard drive is filling up, so I don't know when this thing is going to cut off. We actually cut off when we were talking about reforming Iran, and I had to put it on the other drive. But it goes back to Homs though, right? So like one funny Abdullah Hashim coinage is he calls them the non-working scholars, which is and I Googled it. It's only him. So he coined that, and that's quite a good phrase. I'm sure a lot of Quranists and a lot of different reformy type people, even like Mufti Abu Layth, who doesn't primarily get his income from, he's my favorite Sunni guy. He gets a little Patreon, he gets a little YouTube, little Patreon income, but he does business like Abu Hanifa, like Imam Malik, like myself. So if I'm writing books, it's because I'm writing it on the backs of the financial investors and the market and so on, right? Or programming work or something. So yeah, I think that's important. I've been contemplating one way to try to wrap up here. One way where theology might be relevant to this wider social justice question, and how do we lead, and how it was kind of the theme of this conversation. How do we organize people into a better social pattern? Is that there are these theophanies in, let's say, the angel of the Lord that visits Hajar, right? So this is the premise of why there would be an Arab prophet, okay? And it's not necessarily Christ, like, Jay Dyer and the Orthodox Christians would say. It could be Enoch, or it just could be an angel who's got the badge, okay? Fine. But so it's not necessarily shirk. There's a twist, okay? And then the Quranists, it's like it doesn't say, it says Rasul, it doesn't say Risala, so there is a lived immanentization of theophany, even if he doesn't have every hadith he ever said is not necessarily a true prophecy. He's got enough going, and there's that mulk in the theophany. And like Gospel of John, you can't really throw it all of the Gospel of John because of the Parakletos Ahmad connection in the Quran. As a Muslim, you could, as a Unitarian Christian, they generally don't. They do a lot of work trying to reinterpret that text. So one way you could reinterpret, like John 10, the Father and I are one, and nobody has seen the Father, but twist, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, right? So God is transcendental. You can't see him. This is like, a Sunni Hadith thing. The Abadis and the Tazlis and so on, they generally get that right, that it's too much.
You did not throw when you throw, but God threw. It's the same theology. It's basically same perspective. Look, the Bayan's Christology is very straightforward. As far as we're concerned, the second coming of Jesus happened in Muhammad Rasulullah, peace be upon him. So this event of the second coming of Christ has already occurred from our perspective. And this was the prophet himself.
So the Maddi's come, Christ isn't coming back. It's us and God's guidance, and we're the ones we've been waiting for, essentially.
Well, yes and no. And that's a whole different conversation that would take probably a couple of hours to cover. But essentially, yes. From kind of a basic point of view, yeah.
All right, well, we'll explore that on the next one. I also wanted to touch, I was just listening to Sheikh Nurjan. I hadn't listened to him for a while after he said Dajjal is going to tell you to worship God alone. I was like, okay, this is too much. So I was listening to him, and in some sense, I like the things that Abdullah Hashim says more than Nurjan, because at least he talks about all the different prophets. But they both kind of lay on this theology of like, you have to go. In his case, it's a very popular figure among billions of people, so it's a little bit more accessible. And then it's draped in the Sunni thing with, we like Abu Bakr, he's our Sisala guy, and so, that Haqqani did. And I was thinking that maybe the difference between shirk and a sanctioned wasila is that you put this barrier down, and you like the gate in Surah Hadid. So going back to the Bab, it's the Bab, right, as the word that I believe is used. And you say the Bab this is the only Bab. Now, in the case of Surah Hadid, that's true, because if you're a munafiq, you're lucky to have one Bab. But, for everybody else who's in between, there's really been an abundance of mercy from Allah through various messengers. And this is how 569 can be true, while 385, I think, the deen in the eyes of Allah is Islam, can also be true. So, do you agree with that general assessment?
All things perish but his face. That is my perspective, both on the ontological question and on the question of religious diversity. That's the bottom line for me.
That's a very nice way to cap this off. All right, well, I'm going to go run off and do a Laytul Qadr and have iftar. So it's been great. Thank you for your time, Sheikh. I really appreciate it. I hope that this was worth your time. I hope that these were interesting questions. MashaAllah. I'm the one who suggested you be added to that group chat, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm quite a fan.
All right. Well, they didn't like me talking about a female imam. This is another topic for a future discussion. But this was the rumor for years that the last Aga Khan had actually nominated his daughter. And the minute I broached it, some of the Aga Khanis on this list, got really nasty. So I basically left. That's
why you left. It wasn't because of the dissatisfaction with their jihad.
Yeah, I mean, I've already known what their jihad is about anyway, so it was neither here nor there. It was over that issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe you come back later. I don't. Who knows? But anyway, Ramadan Kareem. Inshallah, we can maybe have another episode in like a month or something.
No problem. Yeah. Can you just send me a copy of this once you're done uploading it?
Yeah, I got to edit it and then I'll upload it and send it to you. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh.
Thank you for your time.
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam. Be well.
All right, you too, mate. Cheers.